Hi there everyone, and welcome to Fingers, Fums and Fits. In this episode of Anime and Video Games, I will be painting Ryu and Ken from the Street Fighter series. I'll be looking at them both in this video, and timestamps will be on the timeline and in the video description. So, that being said, can I keep the paint inside the lines? Let's find out. I will be using these minis by RNE Studios, and supplied by We Print Miniatures, which I have already primed in Mechanica Standard Gray. But which character do I choose first? Please let me know in the comments below who your preferred choice is. I've always been a Ken kinda guy myself, but let's start off with the poster boy for the franchise. And building from that primer, I painted his gi and Hadoken with gray sear. And yeah, I know, his outfit is white. We'll get to that. Also, despite all of his traveling, Ryu is still a bit of a pasty fella, so I based his skin with Kislev flesh. I painted his headband and gloves with Mephiston red. And his hair and belt with Black Templar. Before we get to some washes. Starting with Blood Angel's red on his headband and glove. Guilliman flesh on his skin. And then a nice liberal wash of Apothecary white on his gi. Now for some relayering, starting with the Kislev flesh on his skin, and staying away from the recesses where the wash has landed. Then the Mephiston red on his gloves. And the gray sear on his gi. Before getting on to some highlights, which I'm going to show all in the one photo. I started with Dark Reaper for his hair. Administratum gray on his belt. Evil Sun scarlet on his headband and gloves. And finally Korax white on his gi. But what about that Hadoken? Well, I'm glad you asked. I started with 2 coats of Tyrant blue. Followed by a layer of Hoth blue, and random highlights of Rust gray. And then all that was left was to base the model, which I did with a kind of asphalt effect. He is fighting on the streets after all. But, no time to stop now. I think I hear a new challenger approaching. Like his rival, we started off with the gray spray. But, unlike Ryu, we're actually going to paint his skin first. And as Ken is slightly more tan than his Japanese counterpart, I started off with a base of Cadian flesh tone. And then moved on to his gi, which I painted with Mephiston red. His luscious blonde locks with Averland Sunset. And broke out channel favorite XV88 for his gloves and belt. Now, we're going to ignore those flames for the moment, and get to the washes. Which was fairly simple here, as I washed the whole model with a 2-to-1 mix of Lamian Medium and a Grax Earthshade. As you can see, that already made a huge improvement over the flat tones, but of course we have to get to the relayering. And I started with the Cadian flesh tone on his skin. Followed by the Mephiston red on his gi. And the Averland Sunset on his hair. We aren't going to relayer the browns, as the shading was subtle enough there. So let's move on to some highlights. And why not start with said hair, as I popped a bit of Aerial Yellow onto some of the more prominent strands. I then highlighted the raised areas and edges of his gi with Evil Sun Scarlet. And gave his gloves and belt a slight tickle on the edges with Carrick Stone. Now it's time to address that flame. Prior warning here, I am not really very good at painting fire, so this could go one of 2 ways, and as it's a large piece of the mini, it could make or break the entire model. But here's how I did it. I started by applying 2 coats of Korax white. You want the base to be as bright as possible, so you could use white scar here, but I didn't have any to hand at the time, so this works too. And now, we are going to use a technique called feathering, which involves blending the edges of one layer into another. However, in my haste to get it done I only took the one picture. And it was of the end result. So, to start, I painted the whole area with Yondan yellow. I had to use 2 coats, as mine was quite thin. But you do want sufficient saturation. When that was dry, I applied a layer of Griffhound Orange from about 4/5 down to the end of the flame. However, whilst this was still wet, I cleaned the paint off the brush, dabbed most of the water off on a tissue. You do still want to retain a bit of moisture, but not much, and started rubbing it over the point where the orange meets the yellow until it blends into the previous layer. This method was then repeated for Blood Angels Red from about halfway, Flesh Terrors Red from about a quarter of the way, and Black Templar at the tips. Just remember to leave the previous layer to dry fully before applying the next one. And then, following a basing method similar to Ryu's, I think we can call Ken done too. Thankfully, that flame turned out alright, and he's now ready to Shoryuken till his heart's content. And so here they both are, ready to have a scrap for the sake of a friendly rivalry. But anyway, what do we think? Did I manage to keep the paint inside the lines? Please let me know in the comments below, and do let me know which is your favorite too. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again for the next one. Have a great day everyone, and I'll see you later.